Hello and welcome to... Is this a podcast episode? Do we count this as a podcast episode? Is this just a legally required thing because I need to make some of my budget back from the trip? Are we just talking about this? We've just seen Furiosa this evening, so let's make a video about it, because why not? We're all here. I'm here. You probably know who I am because, it's my YouTube page, yes. But does everyone want to introduce themselves, even though some of them are significantly more well-known than me?
No. I don't know. I'm Ryan Hollinger. Why review horror films? I'm not here by choice.
Maddie kidnapped him
I thought that was your job.
with a sack. Usually,
You chased after him with one of those comic butterfly catching nets.
with a.
I feel like Furiosa would have probably done something like that if the film was just a little bit older. If it was an older Mad Max movie, there might have been some butterfly nets or something like that.
Fantastic.
You have to introduce yourself too.
Hello, I'm Eric, aka Omega. I'm sure you know who I am. I mean, hopefully. Yeah.
And I'm Film Brain.
So you like how I'm the one with no platform? I'm like, but you know me, obviously.
I'm Diamanda Hagen, and we've done videos occasionally together.
Yes, of which this is one of several.
The last time we did one of these was for Birds of Prey, which was right before COVID. So hopefully this isn't, going to happen again.
Yeah, hopefully that isn't some sort of omen anyway. But we've managed to replace Ashens with Ryan Hollinger, so I don't know. I don't know. It's about
colors
equal
your
pegging,
couch?
equal.
Because,
It's a bit of a, horizontal move.
Had to be diplomatic, man. We're all equals here.
We're here to talk about the latest Mad Max saga, Furiosa. I guess, how would I describe the plot of this movie? It's the origin story for Furiosa, who was played previously in Fury Road by Charlize Theron, now played by Anya Taylor-Joy. She is stolen away from the Greenlands of her youth, and then she is essentially thrust into the orbit of, what is his name again? Demetrius?
Dementus.
Dementus.
See, I can tell you've not played the Mad Max video game. Lord Dementus is like a mythological character in that, in the deep lore of the game.
that sounds like something like a 14-year-old would write in their notebook with punk rock letters.
Yeah.
Definitely does. The demented angle, Dementus. Yeah, it's like a Dementor.
Yeah.
Because you see, the Mad Max video game was based on the Fury Road Bible, which included the backstory, the plots for this film, and the thus unmade Wasteland and Fury Road. So they were able to mine all this stuff, and that's why there's a lot of continuity between the two. Although they don't line up perfectly. Yeah.
See, that's the great thing about the Mad Max franchise, is that they have so many great character names.
I'm just gonna call him Thor. I thought that.
Yeah, pretty much.
When he had the red beard and stuff, that was the closest that Hemsworth has ever been to actually mythological Thor.
That's a good point. Yes. I was going to bring that up in a second.
Spoilers.
She's thrust into the orbit of Chris Hemsworth's Dementus, and then that puts her in the orbit of Immortan Joe, who we previously met in Fury Road and the War Boys. Dementus takes away her mother, her youth, and she wants her revenge, and she wants it in pretty epic fashion. To give some non-spoiler thoughts on the movie, I would say that it's similar to Fury Road, but all the Mad Max movies have their own kind of personality to them.
Yeah.
I mean, I should qualify. I've seen all the Mad Max movies, but I know that other people haven't, so...
It's the first and half of the second one back in the 80s. So,
I've seen all of them.
Yes.
And the game.
Yeah, I would see I would see them in bits, but I've never other than Fury Road, I've never fully committed to watching an entire one in its own right. So
If you've seen Fury Road, I think you're fine, because it's like a soft reboot anyway.
Yeah, because that's the thing. It's so out of context. I think we were saying when we came out of the movie, I was so used to I know that in the original film, I was just some sort of copper during a sort of unexplained disaster time, and it's but no, it's not. It's people with guitars and crazy outfits and everything. And
Well, the big jump happened between the first and the second one, because Road Warrior had the smegma crazies and the gay boy berserkers.
The Road Warrior pretty much set the
Ayatollah
blueprint
rock and roller
for everything that went on to follow.
Yeah.
And then kind of all the movies have been kind of riffs on what the Road Warrior had set up, but they're all very different in their own right. They all kind of go into different directions. No movie kind of feels like the Terminator franchise, where all of them feel like remakes of Terminator 2 to a varying degree.
that was the thing I was going to say. I understand this is kind of obviously this is off topic from talking about Furiosa, but that was the thing I walked out of watching Fury Road was oh, like Mad Max is not technically the main protagonist of this film. He's kind of in somebody else's story.
That's quite common with Mad Max
Yeah,
films.
but I kind of really vibe with that. And I thought, oh yes, you could really like, like James Bond, you could just literally replace this as any character.
It's quite a common interpretation of Mad Max that it's that he's not actually involved in any of these stories except for the first one. That these are plots that happened, but then Mad Max became like in the early days of the apocalypse, he became like a folk hero who then died on some back road. But then decades, generations later, people retold the story and they included this character from another tale. That's how myths evolve.
All folklore, mythology vibe going on to all these movies, and I feel like
also Gilgamesh was there. He was totally there in Babylon.
You really get a total sense of that in this one as well, which kind of takes the Mad Max kind of lore and really turns it into kind of like an epic. Like there's been no entry that feels like this. It feels like it takes what Fury Road did and then kind of massively expands out the world.
It's like if you took the Bartertown stuff in Thunderdome and you massively expanded it hugely.
Yes, which is fitting because the night before I was watching Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome on ITV4, so I had a very good frame of reference for that.
So you got Beyond Thunderdome?
Yeah, I did.
Good.
Unfortunately, I got Beyond Thunderdome to the kids stuff, which is, the bad Mad Max.
Yeah, the start of Thunderdome is the best Mad Max, the stuff with the kids is the worst Mad Max.
If you came into this movie expecting it to be like Fury Road again, it's not that movie. It's more plotty, it's more dialogue-y,
more mythic.
It's not like chase sequences 80% of the running time. I mean, it's got the stuff there, but there's much more going on here.
As a non-film person, I had two major observations, which I shared when we got out of here, but I'll say it again now, is then the first one it did not feel like it was as long as it was.
Yes, I would agree.
Like, I had lunch at 12 or 1 p.m. and we were going to go to Chinese buffet afterwards, and you'd think I would be thinking the whole time, Jesus Christ, I'm starving. But it really wasn't like that. And the second thing was, it felt like reading a novel.
Yes.
But in all the good ways. And I don't know if I can properly articulate that, but it just did feel like I had sat down on an afternoon and read an entire novel.
Yes, and that's why my plot synopsis sounded a bit weird, because technically the movie is a bit unwieldy plot-wise. It's a bit, because it's kind of going in so many different directions, which, like you said, has a novel-like structure. I mean, the movie's even chaptered, which is, I'm going to be brutally honest, one of my least favourite modern movie things. Why is so many things chaptered? They don't need to be chaptered. I don't know why they're doing this.
I would have been happy with another hour of this. They have what you'd expect to be a massive, action, big sequence thing, but they sort of skip over it, and I would have really liked the next hour just for that.
This was the literal representation of the trope, and then there was the war.
Yes.
And then after the war...
And it already began with that at the beginning of the movie, because it's like, a nuclear bomb dropped at some point. There was a horrible war.
Australia barely noticed because, this is just Australia every day.
That's literally how we get taught about the First World War in, at least, when I grew up in American schools. So they'd be like, well, and then there was the war. And then after, we just never talked about it. I'm like, it's called the Great War. What are you hiding?
I had that throughout the entire film, whereas because it's broken up into those different chapters, it does feel like it does these... I understand the need for time skips because it's going for her as a child right through to where she was. It pretty much builds right to the start of
Fury Road.
Her scenario is. And I was like, but it did feel like it had to cut out these big ellipses in between it. It felt like a new season of a TV show to me at times. I was like, here's this part of her life, and now we're into this next part. And it just sometimes, structurally, I felt like it's a little disjointed. I don't know.
Yeah, so from a structural point of view, I always felt like the movie was... I wasn't quite certain where it was going sometimes, because the structure
wanted an extended director's cut.
Furiosa.
Yeah, that's going to have a lot of stuff.
Because we mentioned the Mad Max movies, Max is a protagonist, but he's also kind of like a side figure. He wanders into world.
Yeah.
And to some degree it's sort of like that here. Furiosa is the title character, but Anya Taylor-Joy doesn't appear as the older version. She pops up almost an hour into the movie, which is very late for a top-billed actor to suddenly walk in.
Yeah, because that was the thing I said, is I felt like the whole focus on her as a young child and where she ended up. Obviously, there was a lot of plot beats that needed to be there to get her to where she was, but it was surprised how much that took up the film, and then it felt like as it went along, the movie got faster and faster to its climax, because it just felt like Like I knew that. I guess maybe it was that sequence where
Like a car downshifted.
the war thing happened, where I was like, oh, now we're suddenly in the climax, and it's just happened. I don't want to spoil anything yet, but it's like the whole situation with Chris Hemsworth's character and like his situation with his group and how that's all devolving and falling apart. And he's not a good leader, but then suddenly it rushes past that part to where it's like then there's this sequence where they go to a place and he's taking it over or something like that.
Yeah.
But it feels like there could be I would have liked to spend more time with him. I know it's not Furiosa's movie, but I kind of want to see more of this development than that.
But for the first hour, it kind of is his movie.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
He's given all the witty lines, and he's like, I feel like he's the one that's got the. I mean, give his performance, but like I feel like he is like. I also think because Furiosa is a very almost mute protagonist for most of the movie as well. Which I kind of really liked about it. But again, I think it was like again trying to channel Mad Max, kind of his characterization where he's very muted in Fury Road. But then him being big and boisterous and taking over the show is kind of. It's kind of integral to his character because he's obviously a showman and he's basically like eventually someone calls his bluff and he's not really actually this big showy guy that he thinks he is. He wants to be this legend. He wants to be seen as the same figures. Who's the main villain in Fury Road that's the main Mac?
And Mortan Joe.
Yeah, so like he kind of wants to be seen in that, he wants to be revered in that regard, but nobody takes him seriously and he's actually just this like douchey guy who happens to have control.
He's just really bad at it. Like I said, he's basically... in his abilities to be competent and his efficacy, he's just about one step up from, like, Captain Jack Sparrow.
Yeah.
Because he's incredibly bad at this. Like, oh my god, like, it's the kind of person that you know in your organization or your school or whatever, who's just is awful and just an idiot, but they always somehow skate by, and you're like, how are you still alive? Why haven't you licked electrical sockets yet? Jesus Christ.
Yeah, Chris Hemsworth's performance is fantastic in the movie. He is
So
great.
what you're saying is that, Lord Dementus is Homer Simpson and Immortan Joe is Frank Grimes.
Maybe in a certain
He is very philosophical, and he does again, not getting into spoilers, but he does get quite profound near the end and stuff like that. And it's like I don't want a movie about him, but you could easily I think there's enough of an enigma around him, and there's enough ambiguity, and there's like enough of like a curious figure within him that it's like I want to know how he ended up to where he is, because how he ever stumbled into his whatever position of fleeting power that he has to have gotten there somehow, and he clearly talks with someone with some sort of wiseness or some sort of perspective on the world. But it's like, there is a lot to him. It's like, I think the less, again, it's like, you get just enough nuggets where he isn't just over-explained as a character. He is enigmatic enough.
Although, he has that history man hanging around with him. He's always like, history man, tell me things. So it could be just like, not even like a Dunning-Kruger kind of thing. It just could be he's basically a parrot, and he has picked up enough profundity from the history man that he can bring bits of it forth when he needs to.
Oh, yeah.
But at the other times he's like, okay, love you, bye, and then like runs away from his...
Figuring in about 10 years, we'll probably get a prequel called Dementus.
Yeah, probably.
Again, it's just like, I know I don't want to focus too much on Dementus because he's like he's obviously not the main.
But he is a fairly big part of the movie, and what I took away from it is that he's someone he's like very self-aggrandizing, wants to create his own legend. Like all throughout the movie, he's kind of adopting these various like riffs, like nicknames, like I'm the Red Dementus, I'm the Dark Dementus.
It's almost like a kind of a weirdly meta parody of Thor himself, because even with his cloak and everything, I could have thought like, I know that Chris Hemsworth played Thor and stuff like that, but it's like I can't get out the idea that there isn't some channeling of that character's own like. He's big and powerful, but he's also a bit dim.
Yeah, he wants.
It's the full-on. It's the mythic Thor, where he is that kind of character. He's a bit dim, bit of a party animal. Has red hair, which is, so that is the most Thor Hemsworth has ever been on screen, in character-wise.
He's a character that wants to amass power, but he doesn't know how to use power. And
visually,
that's
though, in Endgame, when he was fat Thor, who had the bearded braid in the final battle, that was the most visually he looked like Thor, because Thor's meant to have a big beer gut and basically be more like a world's strongest man than a bodybuilder.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess that we do see three models of competent leadership, because they're competent. They have these abilities, and people follow them because, like, oh my God, you can kill people, you can protect me. I'm gonna follow you.
There's that bit in The Road Warrior where he goes, "You want to live? You go with me."
Yeah, but then you have Immortan Joe, who is a leader because he delegates properly. And I'm not saying that Immortan Joe's like ironclad rule over the Citadel is proper, but it is effective. And then you have Dementus, who talks a big game, who can inspire a lot of followers for, like, he's like, let's have fun, let's have a quick buck, I'll give you what, he rolls into the Citadel and says, don't worry, downtrodden people, I'm gonna take over and give you, and let's all rise up.
And then makes everything worse.
No. So you do have those kind of three methods of leadership, two of which are successful and one of which isn't, and unfortunately, Dementus is not very effective.
He does know how to kind of amass that kind of like cult of personality around himself,
100%.
and when that the veneer of that is threatened, then you kind of really see this horrible sadistic side of him emerge. Like the casual cruelty of him is always there, but it's especially present when he has to dole out punishment.
Just like politicians, kids.
Yeah.
Because at the heart of it, it is like it is a revenge story. Like she has to go after him for. Was that in the synopsis? Did you spoil that bit?
No, I said that in the synopsis. Everyone knows it's a revenge story, but
again, it's like the thing about him is that, like, again, I was really worried going in about it being a revenge story. Going like I don't like calling things cliche, but it's like, crap, you're not going to go down this route of it being like, what's the moral of getting revenge is never sweet and stuff like that. I know, so there's a lot we can talk about in the spoiler section of it. It feels like, because part of her development as a character is like she's so fixated on getting him, but there's also a part of her realizing her own, like, worthiness as a character. And that's kind of where the Mad Max template character comes in. Jack, is it?
Praetorian Jack.
Praetorian
Jack, and he kind of comes in, and I find that's why I find him the most interesting part of the film. Not him personally. I think his character is kind of just.
He's like a Max surrogate.
He's an insert for Mad Max, and he feels there.
You could easily cut him out and just rearrange a couple of things, and the story wouldn't actually be changed that much.
Yeah.
But I think he kind of brings a side to her character I wish was explored more, where it's like they build a war rig, and then she goes with him, and then all his war party gets destroyed except for her. He helps him out, and then he hires her to help him because she's like clearly very competent.
He becomes like a mentor figure.
Yeah, and then again, it does that kind of time jump where now she's suddenly all trained. And yeah, you don't really need that whole mentor thing because we kind of know she's going to be trained, ready, and stuff like that. But she's so fixated on her revenge, but there's another part of her where it's actually she's still trying to figure out who she is in this world because she's never.
And she's trying to figure out her way back home.
Yeah, I think that like that way back home part of it, it's like I think it's like there's a little bit too much, like especially in the second half, it lands so much in the revenge part that I think the part of her being just her and her finding her place in the world. Obviously, she does find it in the end. It's like I wish that was kind of a little bit landed a bit more on that. That's why I wish the scenes with that guy Jack was a bit more extended. But then you can
especially because there's like a romantic angle that kind of emerges through
the romantic angle bothered me
because I was trying to figure out, like, so she's probably 10-15 years since she was kidnapped. Now she was kidnapped at maybe let's say she looked about 6 or 7.
I was gonna say like she looks about like sort of 10ish or something like that. Yeah.
All right, so she'd be 25 at that point. I guess. I don't know.
I thought the romantic angle was really unnecessary. Yeah. I know you have season movies all the time where like romantic angles are unnecessary, but it just felt like there was no indication in their relationship that there was anything romantic. It did feel very, what's the word? Where like
kind of platonic.
Yeah, because he's just training her, and he's like, okay, this last mission.
Paternal,
Yeah.
Like that's what I thought that they were going for, and then and that's what I thought. He's like, oh, I'll come with you, and she's like, oh, I bring this father figure back. But then right when shit gets really, really real, she's like, oh, Jack, and I was like, what are you doing? Where did that come from?
But I guess I don't know. Obviously, I have to think about it more. But like, I'm wondering how much that had an impact. Like, was that written in such a way to have to add more context to her relationship with Mad Max in Fury Road?
Yeah, I imagine that was the idea. Why she's so standoffish?
Yeah, she's standoffish, and then she like sort of spares him, and it's like, well, because there is like a real tense relationship in Fury Road. And I feel like I wondered if that helped. If she reminded him of some way, I wondered if that was maybe that she's trying to like
marry that sort of into
context to it. Because again, it's one entirely different show, but like that's kind of what Better Call Saul did with being a prequel to Breaking Bad. I know it's entirely different thing. I'll get into it, but like some characters are recontextualized through the prequel in a better way. So you actually,
I feel like that's what this is trying to do.
Yeah, and I think the more and more I think about it, and that's why I kind of like the Jack character was like actually, he adds a very symbolic kind of spiritual part of that for her and her relationship.
There's one bit where Fury Road, as far as I can tell, was made much weaker by this film. Mm-hmm. If you watch Fury Road by itself, you can imagine that Joe did all these terrible things to her, and that's why her killing of him is incredibly sort of like revengey type. It even says, "Remember me."
Yeah.
This one does not depict any of that. She has no real reason to hate Joe.
That's a good point.
That is a good point.
I was thinking,
Joe's a scumbag, but he wasn't a scumbag to her.
It's never really depicted on screen to her, which is, and the implication in Fury Road is that she's undergone a substantial amount of abuse, but it feels like that's kind of glossed over in like especially the final
like
portion of the film.
Gamora and Thanos. Well, so that's what I was thinking, because there is. Are we spoilers yet, or just halfway through? Just
I was going to talk about a little bit about Anya Taylor-Joy as well, because we haven't talked about her yet. We haven't, because what did you make of her performance? Because I liked her performance. I think she was good. She was very much
She's a
carrying.
very angular face, and she reminds me of a woman that I knew in undergrad.
She
big
perfectly looks like a younger Charlize Theron.
Yeah, it felt like she was very much kind of taking the mantle and just.
I treat her the same way I see Tom Hardy in Mad Max. It's like it's not like it's like the performance fits the character that they have there, where it's like she doesn't get any of these big spectacular moments, because it's sort of her character is meant to be kind of very
internalized.
And again, it's like not bad thing, but there's still, you can definitely see like there's a lot of nuance in Mad Max.
I just had an idea.
And that very abruptly concludes the non-spoiler version of the podcast, so be warned, spoilers from here on out. Anyway, back to the podcast.
We never see Pretoria and Jack die. What if the Furiosa is actual events, but then in Fury Road is someone retelling it as a myth, and the mysterious stranger that she finds is not Max. In reality, it was Pretoria and Jack, and that their story is not exactly the same, but it's roughly the same. That's a possibility that if in the quote-unquote real events of Fury Road, it might have been Pretoria and Jack, and things might have been very different about what happened there, because it's myth, so tales being told over and over again, and changes happen. Somehow I didn't end up correcting this in the moment, but yeah, Jack is very dead. He gets dragged behind a motorcycle. I presume that some of us missed this because it happened in the background of the scene, but still, it's pretty clear that Jack, he ain't coming back from that. Anyway, back to the podcast.
It sounds like the history man is the narrator, and he might not be a reliable narrator.
Yeah, and the second one was the feral child was narrating it, so they've done that sort of thing before.
They've done that in Mad Max movies a lot. Like they'll have the narrator, like Thunderdome has that as well. And there's a lot of kind of running themes in these sort of Mad Max films where they kind of talk about the elements of the past, because it's recent-ish history, but not recent enough that a lot of the characters actually remember it. Like a lot of like what they know civilization is mostly passed down as all history. And,
like in both Road Warrior and Beyond Thunderdome, Bruce Spence turns up as a guy who helps Max out, and he's got a plane. These are two different characters. So that's another example of, a possible example of it being myth, that this is another archetype that has ended up inside this narrative. Yes. Kind of like how a lot of
like pantomime, you guys all love that, and there's like always specific characters.
Yeah, this is that's another version of it, yes.
The idea is kind of like modern myth and history, and kind of like it's almost like it's being passed down at sort of like a campfire, and like details kind of expanded upon.
I remember the Simpsons, kids, you don't know.
I feel like this one really leans into that aspect, especially. You really get a sense that this is not a literal story in many senses. This is like this is a whole mythology.
For instance, there's a school of thought about Norse mythology is that Loki and Odin were originally the same character. Because in academic stuff on Norse mythology, things get changed partway through Viking history. Like Tyr is usually the main god, the god of honourable combat.
They also directly cite things like Viking history and things like that.
Oh,
so
they did.
The point of comparison when they bring up the war later on.
But then later on, Tyr gets replaced by Odin, and Loki appears out of nowhere in the myth. Like there's he has no similar figures in in local mythologies. So it is thought that possibly Loki and Odin were the same person, and then Tyr gets replaced as the main god by Odin, who is basically among other things, he's the god of dishonourable war. And that's around the same time the Vikings went raiding. The idea that people get just included and merged and split apart over like myth and stuff, very, very common.
Yeah, and I imagine that feels like the stuff that Miller is pulling on all throughout these movies, but especially in the later ones where the style is heightened even further, and you're kind of pushing things even more so than you would be able to do in the 80s in certain respects, and certainly a lot safer than you would be able to do in the 80s, as anyone who has ever watched the Making of the Road Warrior documentary can attest, and the injuries that are shown in that.
Well, I like when they showed the 15 certificate, and there's something like swearing, and it said injury detail, and I couldn't help myself. I laughed because I imagined that they were like a fracture of the tibia, and then at the cervical spine. Just like it sounded very like clinical, like someone would be like.
We knew exactly what moment that was referring to.
That fits with George Miller being a doctor who got his inspiration from working in an ER.
Yes, that was where part of Mad Max came from, wasn't it? It was kind of like you're working in an ER and it feels like the world's coming to an end every single night.
Wear your seatbelt, kids.
That was like, now you're all saying all that, and I was like saying, I thought, actually, is it weird? Like, probably my biggest problem with the film was just like, I thought it was the most underwhelming reason how she lost her arm. Like, that's it. I thought it would have been something
She
else.
chopped
But
her
here's the thing.
off to escape.
Did she chop it off?
Yeah.
Yes.
He hung her there to watch, and that's the thing.
We should get into the spoiler section.
Oh, sorry. I mean,
Yeah, she gets mangled in the crash, and then she's tied up by it. So then she chops it off in order to get away.
Oh, does she chop it off? I thought she like forcibly ripped it off because
when he was pulling it off, but you could see the tear in it. I thought, oh, maybe I'll...
Because and think of it, that was very like.
Well, she removed it because remember on Mad Max 1, the bit that was ripped off by Saw, this will get you through your foot cuff in like 2 minutes, but you'll be dead by that point. So but it'll get you through in half the time if you cut through your foot, which was taken directly from the first Mad Max and ripped off by Saw. So it could.
Oh yeah, that's what he does to the villain at the end of it. I thought the bit you were going to mention was the bit where Max has his arm in the road and the bike runs over his arm, because there's that moment, isn't there, in the first
There's
one?
a lot of symbolism behind that, because remember, that was the arm with the tattoo of her map home.
Yes.
So she sacrificed remembering her way home to live.
Yes, and they make a big point of the sort of tattoo because she's putting the star constellations on her arm.
And remember, her knife was hidden on her, and plus, it's much quicker to cut through her arm than the cuff.
Yes.
Plus, it's already been, fucked up.
And it's again Dementus's own casual cruelty actually backfiring against him, because she's initially strung up by the uninjured arm, and then he specifically instructs to put it by the injured arm, and that allows her to escape.
And something that I was wondering, you know how the guy, like, he's do it, and he's like, oh, are you going soft? Like, it really made me wonder if he saw her doing it and deliberately turned a blind eye. Because he was like, I didn't see nothing. Yeah. That's like kind of like ambiguous.
What's interesting about the Mad Max films, I think that's part of the appeal of them, is the kind of the idea of the humanity of the characters and what's left of them, and they're still trying to find that. And Furiosa's attempt to try and go back home, that is kind of her guiding path in terms of her humanity. You kind of see that with Max as well. Max in some of the other movies, he kind of sacrifices his chance at maybe going somewhere like Furiosa does. Like at the end of Beyond Thunderdome, he gets off the plane to allow them the chance to escape and kind of moves back into the wasteland. And Furiosa kind of does that here to a certain extent.
Yeah, because she just goes back to Morton Joe. Although, eventually we know how that plays out.
Yeah.
Although at the end, I got the feeling that it made it look like, she came back to Morton Joe and then instantly left on Fury Road. I got the feeling there's at least 5 years there.
Yeah, it's
5 to 10 years.
The ending of the movie was really weird for me, because that was the most jarring of time jumps, because, you kind of expect, like, oh, maybe Charlize Theron's going to pop up at the very end of the movie or something like that.
Well, she apparently did not get on well with George Miller and hated filming Fury Road.
I mean, it makes sense why that didn't happen, but it still feels weird, because, like, there is an obvious time jump there, but it doesn't feel like an obvious time jump. So
I know they masked it with it being nighttime. It's like, I never see her face, so clearly it was supposed to be an older Furiosa. But but again, it's not the same thing I have. The issue I had with like near the last act, whereas like it does feel things move all like really quick, and
it starts feeling a bit rushed.
I don't understand where these jumps to feel unclear. I just feel like there's just a weird progression of time.
I'm still confused that Morton Joe has 3 sons, and in Fury Road you can see 2 of them, and this one you see 2 of them. And although the video game reveals what happens to Scabrous Scrotus, but Corpus Colossus is nowhere in this film. I can only assume the actor physically couldn't do it, and they didn't want to have the character without him.
He's managing some war boys in another office.
I mean, that could probably be it, but it's just really weird if the actor is still around and acting to have him not appear in some form. He was like one of the main officiators of the Citadel.
I mean, it is a good point that you mentioned that they really do downplay the sort of antagonistic side of Mortan Joe. Like, he is like a secondary antagonist, but he's just kind of there. Like, he almost feels a bit, he feels a little bit too like, you remember this character? Instead of kind of reminding us, like, give us a little bit more about him as well.
You could argue that it kind of does dilute the series. Like, again, like Fury Road, I liked it because when you have no context, I thought the movie worked a hell of a lot better, because it was just so weirdly strange, weird world with a lot of ambiguous characters and just a lot of strange world building, and I kind of like that. This movie is like, I kind of guess it's like, I say, like, don't explain too much about a character, because sometimes it loses that effect. You need a bit of mystique to them, so don't, like, it's like with Thor, don't overexplain him, because I liked it I liked them being a bit ambiguous. But those characters from Fury Road, it's like, it's kind of, I was in the opposite boat, where I was like, I kind of do want to learn something more about them, because they felt less menacing, because I guess it's because from their perspective, it's like Furiosa is not a they're not really a
Threat.
Yeah, they're not a threat. Like she's kind of neutral with them.
She's kind of working on the Fury Road.
Yeah.
And it's like the one thing I was thinking about, like when they're rolling into Gasoline Town and the War Boys are like, all right, we gotta get the thing filled up. And by that point, I was thinking, you know what? We know that all of these 3 encampments of folks, all of these people are the bad guys. But you see the War Boys, and then because Furiosa is working with Immortan Joe, you're like, oh, but they're the good bad guys that we like.
Yeah, it gets a little bit weird like that, doesn't it?
Then there's the weirdness that, okay, it's been about 5 years since I watched Fury Road. I don't remember Rictus Erectus being that much of a villain. In this one, he's the nastiest of the ones on Immortan Joe's side.
They make him into a proper creep in this, don't they?
Like,
And,
he's seemingly attempting to do something really quite terrible to Furiosa. Remembering Fury Road, I just remember him being muscular, does what his dad says, but he's stupid but good-natured generally. And having that...
he's just mostly the muscle in Fury Road, I remember.
It's like if he'd had a different raising, he'd probably be probably a nice, personable character. Just not smart, but,
I mean, I can't really comment because it has actually been a while since I've seen Fury Road. I don't think I've seen Fury Road since I saw the theatrical release, so I do need a little bit of a, kind of re-jogging in my memory. Like,
9 years from now?
9 years since it came out, yeah.
The scene in question with Rictus, if that had been Immortan Joe doing it, that would have fixed 2 birds with 1 stone.
Yeah, that's very strange. I don't know why they decided to give it to that character instead of that one. Like, it was the more obvious choice.
Because here's what I was wondering: like, does he just forget that he purchased that girl out of the wasteland and sent her into his harem? Did he just never get back to that and never be like, hey, remember that kid that I was gonna probably in 10 years?
Because as a kid she escaped and then she disguised herself as a boy and then started working as a mechanic and then she starts working for Jack, kind of sneaking in, and then he finds her identity, and then they come back to Joe, and Joe doesn't really
she never said her name,
together. Yeah.
So we never knew that was her name. Yeah, but you'd think that at some point he would be like,
when she comes back to Joe's land, she introduces herself to the guy I'm Furiosa,
Dementus claimed that she was called Little Dementus, and I don't think they got her name at the time.
Yeah,
Dementus didn't. But even still, it still seems a bit weird because she hasn't grown up that much. She's grown up a couple of years. But she probably hasn't changed. She recognised them.
I remember theories during Fury Road that Furiosa had once been one of Joe's wives, and that was why she escaped with.
Yeah, I thought that was the prevailing theory, and that doesn't seem to be the case here.
It doesn't seem to be, but I would not be surprised if there was some kind of a deleted scene where Joe makes it very clear that he wants to make her one of his wives. When she's older, when she's working as an imperator, that he makes it clear that if one fuck up from her and he's going to make her one of his wives.
Yeah,
they must have written and filmed something because Miller is too good a filmmaker to have made that level of fuck up. Yeah. It's a long film; it probably got cut out.
I wonder if there were darker stuff that ultimately they decided, look, we want to get a 15 rating. We'll save this for the director's cut.
Well, I think there's also the fact that if you really watch the Mad Max films, especially in the later ones, they're dark and they're all very dark. But in terms of the actual on-screen violence, you don't actually see a whole lot. There's quite a lot of discretion there. It happens very quickly and with not a lot of detail. Perfect first 15 certificate stuff, strong, but not really strong. You see a flash of blood, you see someone go under the tires of a truck or something, but a split second and with no focus on the aftermath or anything like that. It's all very impressionistic. It's done with restraint.
Because I've only seen chunks of the original one or something like that. I haven't seen them in their entirety. I've always known them as dark, sinister movies, and I've always had but I've always known them as but they never explicitly show anything. Yeah. It's a lot of implied, leave it to your imagination kind of feel.
I feel the first 2 movies they were considered quite hard for their time, and they ran into censorship difficulties for quite a long time, and those are quite rough movies. But even then, you can still see it doesn't really focus too much on. It's more about kind of action and stuff rather than direct injury. You have sadistic characters in it, but the movie itself isn't sadistic, and that's kind of the difference. It critiques that element with Chris Hemsworth's character, but doesn't actually indulge in the same thing itself, which it could very easily do. Watch any number of the 6 million Mad Max rip-offs, I'm sure there's at least one of them that does linger on it far too much.
Oh, yeah.
It's probably Italian.
So if you want to go further back into the mists of cinematic time, the earliest example of the movie post-apocalyptic scavenger world, where people are repurposing old stuff in ridiculous ways to create, for their new society that they're building out of the ashes. Things to Come, written by H.G. Wells, 1936, British film.
That's true. We had to watch it for notes. Okay, I had to watch it for notes years and years ago, and I was like, oh my god, that's so like, how did he know? That's such
and
a
you got Ralph, who is it? There's a big name actor who basically plays the big villain character, who is basically a 1930s version of a Mad Max villain. He was inspired. He was called The Boss. He was directly inspired by Benito Mussolini. Was it Ralph Richardson? He was some sort of big fucking British actor who later on became famous. And if he didn't become famous, if this was his classic role, it would have been like basically watching an English version of William Shatner 30 years early.
You mentioned those examples. It feels like Miller is like a really well-read guy, and he's just pulling from all of this. I mean, even at the beginning of the movie, when Furiosa's grabbing the apple, Garden of Eden vibes, like an almost kind of biblical angle to it. So, it's pulling from all these different things, and you've got this potpourri of various inspirations, and then you just put like motor oil on top of it.
Also, on top of that, the very ending involving the tree.
Yeah, the tree of life, essentially.
Tree of life, the world tree, is also a thing from Norse mythology. I'm pretty sure there's a myth or two which has involving trees, people, intermixed like that. Not dryads, but actually a person with a tree growing out of them. Game of Thrones did that.
Yeah, and that's quite a horrific fate for that character, ultimately.
It really did remind me of, Prometheus who gave fire to the humans, and then every day has to have his liver ripped out by the hawk. So it's very like, very mythological. I was like, oh, I see what you're doing. I get the symbol.
I love that. I love that whole sort of. I really like when it was like saying like. Some people would have said, "Oh, it was bad if you just shoot a shot him dead." Some people say this. I kind of like love that legendary angle of like nobody really knows it. It's like, oh, she whispered to me this, and then what they say he did, where his body's being used to fertilize.
Yeah, she carries the seed from her land that her mother gave her.
I think it's a peach pit.
Yeah, and she carries it all throughout the entire movie, and then the ultimate payoff is that she puts it inside him.
Yeah, and he grows through it.
It's fantastic because it's
no, she impregnated him with her seed.
It's like there's also like a sort of a bit of twisted irony is like this, he's going around wanting to be this legend and wanting to be like revered and all stuff. And it's like well, you're kind of were used for a purpose in the end, I guess.
Yeah.
I thought that was the part I thought was really, really touching. I guess there's an element of hope to it where it's like we can create hope out of that such a tragedy.
I think what's interesting is like the movie is so grand in scale, and Dementus and Furiosa do encounter each other, and they have these big dramatic confrontations that you would expect out of a Mad Max movie. You have that whole sequence where they're going in, and then suddenly they realise that it's an ambush. And that's a very lengthy sequence, and it's quite epic, and then it follows into the car chase, and he eventually catches up with them. All that stuff, and that's very Mad Max. That's very Fury Road. It does all of that. But the actual finale of the movie is a very small, very closed off. All the world building that has been built up, it shrinks. It just discards it and just focuses on these two characters just in the middle of the desert. She has him exactly where she wants him to be, and it feels like an extended taunting revenge. She deliberately sabotages his water and disarms the gun in his sleep and just waits for him to wake up and realise that.
The thing that I really wanted to happen, and I know why it didn't, because it would have lost a lot of the emotional throughway. Dementus is on his motorbike. He's all alone. He's driving into the sandstorm, and he puts his goggles down, and the bike that he's traded with one of his people has like a mannequin bust on it. And I really, really thought, and God, it would have been great if there had been goggles around the neck of the mannequin, and he put them on the mannequin too, and I was waiting and it didn't happen. So I was thinking about that for the next few minutes.
Because at that point, his arrogance has unseated him again, because he thinks he's smarter than everyone else, and it turns out he's not, because people
literally stops in the middle of the freaking desert, and it's like, that movie teaches you one thing, is that you don't get that far ahead of the person chasing you, because it's like every time there's a chase sequence, it's like, it doesn't matter how far away they are, that person is dead behind them.
Yeah, because all of a sudden you see this, because ours had the subtitles on, which I thought was well convenient, but then, they're like, okay, I think we lost them. engines revving in the distance.
It's instantaneous, but then that thing is like, you find me, and it's like, of course she find you. You're in the she issued you in the middle of the desert. You went to sleep in the middle of the desert, like
During a sandstorm.
The thing that came to my head was what's the whole story about the slow and steady wins the race, the tortoise and then the
tortoise and the hare
takes to sleep
From Aesop.
it's like he kind of like sort of stops and thinks he's kind of like, and so it's almost like why
he thinks he's
why
escaped.
is he so why is he taking a break here? Like, this girl is dead on tracks and he knows it.
That is the one constant of the Mad Max films. You have never escaped. Do never think you've escaped.
That's why we liked it.
With that one, I reckon it was because he figured no one would be stupid enough to try and follow him in a sandstorm.
Yes.
Oh no, it was absolutely that. Like, that's why, like, his hubris got him in the end, in a way.
Yeah. Well, his hubris got him in an extended way because he tries to take over Morsan Joe's land, and Furiosa alerts him to the fact that it's a ruse. They engage in this war, which eliminates pretty much everyone from him, and so he is pretty much the last one left. And then she tracks him down and personally delivers the coup de grace.
There is a stupidity that's so deliberate to it, though. I'm like, wait, why is this guy trying to take on the Citadel? He's not, but has he not been established to be a terrible leader who doesn't actually have that many people on his side? So it's kind of like, it was inevitably, regardless of Furiosa, it was inevitably going to end in defeat.
He probably just kept failing upwards and kept doing what he'd been doing previously.
He took over that one time, so he was able to clearly got somewhere with it.
I think he was really good as a nomadic leader. They go from place to place, pick up new people, get supplies, keep going on. But when he tried to challenge, like, I don't want to say agrarian, but, a settled hunter-gatherer society that had all of at least the basics of civilization, he completely fell apart because he was basically just a primal leader. But
well, Dementus, his promise
in Crusader King's terms,
don't start talking about
Crusader Kings. He was a tribal leader, not a feudal leader.
Oh god!
But Dementus, like his promise is that, like, the next land I take over, then things will be better. Once I take over the next land, then things will be better.
Again, Crusader Kings.
But he doesn't know how to run things properly.
Again, Crusader Kings.
All I have to do is buy NFTs. Oh wait, no, all I have to do is buy crypto. No wait, all I have to do is invest in AI.
All I gotta do is conquer India.
No one cares about Crusader Kings except you.
But yeah, it's this very brutal kind of personalized revenge at the end of the movie, which kind of, I guess, unseats your expectation of what the climax of a movie like this would be. Like, you'd expect it to have the big action sequence, when actually it subverts that quite heavily.
Like a knife fight or something.
I did think it was very understated, but it was nice that the Dementus, especially in his early parts, he had several Greco-Roman sort of references just to go with the Norse references from Morton Joe. So that was a nice touch as well. You got two different types of sort of paganism.
So I think that the revenge at the end of the movie, they had this quite long discussion, and I suppose on one level you could go like, oh, it's the typical, well, you're just like me conversation, but actually there is enough depth to kind of justify it, because
you kind of feel sorry for her in a way, and then she's like, because he did make that mention going like, what your experience is exactly what I experienced, because he mentioned about his own family.
Yeah, because it's implied, well, not just implied, that he had a family at some point, so there seems to be the implication that you could read into that, like he probably was like a normal guy at some point, and then like he just cracked, and then he's just become this like ridiculous sort of pantomime villain of himself.
A bit like Negan from The Walking Dead.
Oh yeah, like he definitely is. I was like, well, that's why I kind of tackle with, does he have some element of self-awareness to him in that end, where he's kind of like, actually, he kind of knows he's playing this big character that he's not, it's kind of hiding behind a mask in a way, but I say that a lot about
like, he was just an accountant who liked to go to the gym, so when everything broke down, he was already swole, and he was like, well, I guess it's savagery.
It could just be Chris Hemsworth.
Yeah.
No, come on.
There is this weird, the weird recurring motif with the bear, because he gives her the bear, doesn't he?
Oh yeah.
And which belonged to his kid, and that pops up all throughout the entire movie. The bear
And
keeps
the video
popping
game,
up.
arguably.
Quite a distinctive bear, because one of the arms is torn off, and it's like a little plastic arm. I remember,
Foreshadowing.
It's a recurring image. So there's this kind of idea that at some point early on that he protects her like a child. He pulls her out from the hole at one point. So there is that sort of element, but he also doesn't really treat her like a daughter, because he's just using her as a way of trying to get back to where she came from.
That's actually a very common feature of a lot of narcissistic parents who don't have children children because they want to raise or nurture a life. They have children because they think that they're supposed to. Or, this will be Mummy's little doll dressed up, or this will be Daddy's exact copy who's gonna, do all the sports that Daddy never got to do. And, so people who have children because they're supposed to but don't really know how to provide, like, nurturing for them.
Yeah.
So they're basically, this is my child and they're very important because they're important to my ego. It's not important to me that they're a person.
Yes, and that's why he keeps her around in a cage for a good chunk of the movie.
This is my daughter whom I keep in a cage.
Although, to be fair, he also kept the history guy in there too, so that maybe
I
that's
thought the
just...
history guy was there to take care of her.
Well, maybe that is
Because
the case.
the history guy seemed to just go with him of his own accord, and at some point left of his own accord as well.
Yeah, but we didn't see them traveling before she arrived, so maybe it could be either. But I figured that he just kept all of the people he found very, very important to him and useful in this one place that was extra defended.
Because the history guy says become invaluable, and then
Yes.
the grand.
Yeah, so that's probably like a safe for people that he owns that are really important to him.
See, one thing that I thought was going to be a Chekhov's prop, but it wasn't, and I was kind of disappointed, was, when she's a child, she has one of, I think they were Cane Corsos, was the breed of dog that played his dogs, and she has one of the wee puppies, and she's like, oh, and the puppy's like, oh, and then I thought, like, there would be a point at the end where, like, when he, like, sets his dogs, and, like, one is gonna bite her, but then realizes it's her, and it's like, oh, I love you.
That conversation at the end of the movie, I mean, I thought it was kind of interesting because, I mean, I suppose there is that element of that. She has, in some ways, become like him because she is so determined and exacting in her own revenge and her own cruelty. Like, she starts doling it back onto him, but also she's not like him because she, I don't know.
She's competent. She's actually good at things.
Well, also because she still retains her semblance of humanity, whereas he is largely shirked that. He is so cruel to such an extent that even like the people around him are disgusted and disturbed by the kind of measures that he does.
Oh yeah, like the octobus is like, you're an asshole.
Well, I was gonna say actually when you were saying that, it just reminded me of like, well, she's chasing an actual Eden. Like we were saying the whole metaphor about the Garden of Eden at the start. Whereas he makes a point about how anywhere, or even the Jack character, he's exactly like anywhere you go, it's a bad place. Everything is bad. Everything's falling apart. So I suppose in the sense that with Thor, he's not really fighting for an Eden because he doesn't really have one, and he doesn't know how to create one either. Yeah, obviously everybody wants to get to their Eden, they can't seem to locate it and stuff. So when you mentioned there, like where they have similarities, but she retains humanity. So it was like the whole metaphor of like, oh yeah, she has a heaven to go to, whereas he can only ever persistently find hell because that's all it's really left.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Actually, you know what? His whole monologuing at the end, and we're like, oh, at least that he was, like kind of bringing nuance to it. That might have been itself a parodying of, not a parodying, but like a parroting of like previous mythologies of the old world, because the history guy's always telling him all this stuff, and you're hearing things about the old world that passes down. That might be the trope of the villain monologuing at the end. This is what you do when you're about to die. Because of that trope has persisted almost like a biblical trope down into their mythology.
Well, I think there's also the fact that like he talks about like this is the day I'm going to die.
Oh, it's gonna be so epic.
Like, it kind of goes back into the War Boys thing of like witness me, and kind of wanting to be mythologized and wanting to have your legend kind of ascribed. Like here's this guy that died in such a dramatic way, and again she robs him of that technically because she does it in a more discreet and more kind of
Possibly.
extended way.
We don't know for sure.
Yes, but the implication is that she's
there was
exactly
no
this.
audience, because what does he need above anything else is an audience.
It reminded me of a bit in Thunderdome, actually, where the pig killer actually says something along the lines of, what does it matter if I get life? Life expectancy is 3 years anyway, or something like that. So, death is cheap in this world anyway. Death probably has more currency than actually living.
Live fast, die something, leave a beautiful looking corpse.
And speaking of that, the action
fast,
sequences
die
are
fast.
really impressive.
They are, but the issues that Fury Road had, where you can clearly tell the digital stuff added to it, like everyone yelled about how Fury Road was all like, no practical and no CGI, which was all like
Completely wrong.
I mean, not as an insult, it's just a fact. And this one did even more of that. And it was good, but if you're expecting the practical world of the first 3 Mad Maxes, not quite.
To be honest, I made my peace with that because, let's be honest, you would never get away with filming a movie like the original Mad Max trilogy, especially the first 2, because people got really messed up on those movies. Yeah. If there's a way of doing things safely where people don't fly off of motorcycles and then break their legs and things like that, you're gonna do it. So I feel like aesthetically the movie kind of leans into that with this kind of maximalism.
I'm always in favor of treating people in ways that they don't end up horrifically mentally or physically scarred because of being in a movie.
So you've not
looking
watched
at you, Stanley Kubrick.
You've not watched enough film from South Asia, I gotta tell you. Stuntmen there, there's not even insurance probably.
Yeah, it's insane, but for a Western movie, we're not gonna get anything like that.
For all the really, really brutal violence in it, there's with when especially we had Ryan Hemsworth's character, there is comedic sort of I wouldn't say slapstick, but very dynamic kind of deaths. So it's
there's always comedy.
There's the guy that gets shot and he flies over on his bike and you see his legs mangle outside of the snow or outside of the sand. There's just something kind of really humorous about the way it's
so over the top. It's so exaggerated.
When Smeg was thrown into what looked like a sarlacc pit, and he's like, "Oh no!" and I leaned over and I said, "Finally, someone died in quicksand. I've been waiting since the '80s to see it happen." That was great.
The violence becomes almost slapsticky to a point. And again, I think that's a way of kind of it's this big dramatic world, but there is comedy to it. It's oppressive in by design, but it's not oppressive to watch, which is always a very fine balance.
The violence was very differently handled, and Fury Road was basically all business when it came to violence. Everything's done hyper competently and efficiently and edited spectacularly.
And very center frames. They didn't really follow that as much in this one.
In this one, it's a lot more free flowing. It's less laser focused on it. Whether that's a good or a bad thing is up to you. I preferred the way they did it in Fury Road. The action's handled more like it was in the earlier ones.
Yeah, I do think that Fury Road is a better movie. I think it's a stronger movie overall. I think that's because it's more laser focused.
I was gonna say it's the whole thing keep it simple. This movie I felt was more ambitious because it's clearly going for more of an epic on the scale that it's possible doing. But if we're comparing action sequences like that, Fury Road's tight. It's really, really held together. It's a very simple chase movie. It's very, and I think it works that way. And rather than overcomplicating itself, where it's this movie when it put in action sequences, you can see it can't really top what happens in Fury Road. It's
that middle act set piece where they're first on the Fury Road and they're everyone gets kind of wiped out over the course of it. It's inventive, but you're thinking
trying to add new elements to it, the guys in the wingsuits and everything, or
the device at the end of it, the propeller device that kind of mulches people.
I was so happy when they finally got to turn that on because it was lampshaded for so long. I'm like, do the big thing.
Yeah, the whole setup to that was really tragic. That what was it? There was the guy and he gets shot or something like that.
Yeah, there's a very young war boy in the back of it, and he spends the whole time wanting to turn it on, and then right before the moment he dies.
But he put the stuff on, so he died and went to.
I figured he died inside it while it was going on.
No, because he went up and how he put the thing up because that's where the switch was. And then all of a sudden he went down really quick, and she thought he
it started firing at him from the.
Well, because one of the bullets had gone through, got him in the head, and then he fell.
That's why she had to rush over to activate it herself.
I was figuring part of the purpose of that was to kill him, and I was really confused by that.
Yeah. No, it's just basically she thought that he pussed out and went and hid, but he actually got shot in the head.
Yeah, she opens the hatch afterwards and realizes, he's dead in there. I think that none of the sequences top what they did in Fury Road, but it's a really high bar anyway, and I do think.
Yeah, that was a really long climax. That went on for several lifetimes.
I would have been happy for another hour.
I do think...
No, in the original one.
Oh, yeah.
The bit where they're in the ammunition town, that's a really spectacular scene. Where they're on the tower, she's sniping, and then he gets the rocket launcher, and the tower starts collapsing. I think that's probably the best action sequence in the entire film.
That was very tight.
I felt properly tense during it, because I was worried about your guy Jack's safety. I don't know why. I think it was just I was like... Because it did felt very when he took her out of the truck and she's going in the car, it's there's gonna be some sort of build up because they just had the little moment the night before he might die in this scene or whatever, and it's so the whole thing I was waiting for that moment for something really tragic to happen, but so I was on edge with the whole thing.
I was like the Battlestar Galactica remake show. if anybody is happy, someone's 5 minutes away from being shot in the face.
Yes, yes, and I felt like that was kind of the thing with Furiosa. Any semblance of happiness is usually snuffed out fairly quickly.
That's a bad sign.
Where are you going? So full of hope. There is no hope.
Yeah, I'll just trudge merrily along.
Can we discuss how, very briefly, about how multiple actors are playing multiple parts?
Oh, really? Yeah.
Elsa Pataki played the blonde lady from The Green Place who was with Furiosa's mum. That's Hemsworth's wife. She also played one of Dementus's sort of, woman, back assistants who had like all this terrible scarring on her face, called Mr. Norton. And then you've got the guy who played Immortan Joe, also played Dementus's right-hand man with the one eye.
Ah, that's canny because you don't really recognise them as being the same actor. So, that's economical. That's, I mean...
Your man's like, I'm getting so much money out of this film.
If I remember correctly, the guy who played Joe, he was cast as the one-eyed guy first, and then he was cast, just randomly as Joe. He figured he wouldn't have any lines, but he was really proud that he managed to perfect, the hue.
Because the actor that played Immortan Joe had died, didn't he?
Yeah, so he was really proud he managed to do a good impersonation of Hugh Keys-Byrne, who, a rather distinctive way of speaking, Hugh Keys-Byrne, who also played Toe Cutter in the first Mad Max.
Yes, he did. And memorable in that movie as well, in his own right. I liked this. As far as Mad Max movies go, it's definitely not my favourite. I mean, I would personally say that Mad Max 2 is probably still probably the best one.
Like your gold standard?
Yeah, between that and Fury Road. Those are probably the two best, and this is definitely competing for third place with probably the original Mad Max. Not to say that Beyond Thunderdome is a bad movie, but it's definitely by far the weakest of them.
The first half is really good. Yeah. The second half is so bad, it kind of wipes each other out.
It's kind of interesting because Beyond Thunderdome is the only PG-13 Mad Max movie, which is bonkers. It's bonkers to think of, but when you watch the movie, the approach to the violence...
Turner's in it.
Oh, I know that.
Yeah. The approach to the violence is kind of similar to the later ones. In that it's a bit more restrained in terms of the violence. So I suppose it kind of comes from there a little bit as well when you think about it.
It's got one of my favourite little person actors. It's a guy who's in multiple 1930s movies. He was really old and he played a master.
Yeah, Master. One half of Master Blaster.
Oh, I know that.
Yeah. Who runs Barter Town?
Yeah. Which is not to say that that there are really any proper bad Mad Max movies. Like even Beyond Thunderdome, it's definitely a flawed movie, and I don't think it really gels together. As you said,
a lot of the rip-offs are pretty bad, though.
Yeah,
so
the rip-offs are really bad. If you want to see how Mad Max could go wrong, just watch one of those.
Yeah, but made in the mid-'80s mostly. America's like, we got a lot of deserts too. We got a bunch of idiots dressed up as stuff in some cars. So yeah, we can make a Mad Max. Oh no, it does not quite as good. What's going on?
What's Max got to do? It's got to do.
Yeah, the thing is, they're all interesting in their own right. I feel like they're all trying to do something different. They've all got their own kind of unique identities to them, and that's good for a franchise because I think it's very common, especially in this day and age, to just have a movie that just keeps feeling like it's trying to do the same thing without a spin on it.
You know what? The last Doctor Strange movie, we walked out of it and then we went to Lidl to get some groceries, and I was quiet for a while, and I was like, it didn't really feel like a movie. It felt like another episode of the Marvel show.
Yeah, exactly.
It was just like, and Shang-Chi Legend of the Ten Rings, we watched it on Netflix, it felt the same way. It's like, and today on the Marvel show...
It feels like an installment, and many franchises just feel like, and here's another installment.
Well, the MCU, ever since day one, basically has been a series of movies in the style of a TV show.
It is, but they used to have more distinct identities, whereas now, because they're all synced up, they all feel like they're a little bit too interconnected. They're too televisual in a certain sense, which is a bit of a weird thing to say about movies that cost that much, but still, I do think, this is a big, proper cinematic movie, and I do think that Miller has a story to tell, maybe too much story to tell, even for 2.5 hours, but definitely has something he wants to make.
I think it's more engaging, and I know that people talk about superhero fatigue and stuff like that, and this is going to be weird, but go with me. It goes back to 9/11, and they had an issue of Superman, and Superman is like on top of the Empire State Building looking sad, oh, it's the 9/11 episode, and I became unrationally annoyed by that. And I was ranting about it later over some beers with my friend. I was like, here's the thing, right? Superman wasn't there. Wouldn't it be great if Superman or all the superheroes were in the real world and they got the bad guys and they prevented thousands of people from legitimately actually dying? I felt that was the most insensitive thing. And everyone's like, oh, well, in Marvel it was better because they just helped the first responder. Yeah, well, they should have been doing something. We're now at a point in cultural affairs or current affairs in just the way that the world is where, like, it would be really great if Superman came up and took Donald Trump behind, by the back of the neck and then just curb stomped his ass. But that's not going to happen.
Oh, honey. Literally, that happened in the 70s, but it was with Reagan.
Right,
And
but
it was Captain America.
it hasn't happened now. And
No, with Reagan, sorry, Nixon.
And I think that a lot of the, superheroes, it's leaning a lot more silly and a lot more, hey, it's Wong. Everybody likes Wong. Here he is for his cameo. We don't care. There's a war and a genocide
It's
on.
not like a cultural relevance. Is that's the point you're saying? Yeah.
I think the cool thing about Furiosa, again, there was the whole kind of climate change and world tumult aspect at the beginning, is she is a very normal person in extraordinary circumstances who becomes very, this mythical figure.
She becomes resilient, yeah.
By doing all of this stuff. So anyone who sees that, especially maybe like Gen Z or, folks can think to themselves, maybe not on a conscious level, I do like this because this person has agency, even though it feels like
The world has gone mad, yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that I would like to see more films like this. And I hate to say it because I did like a lot of the Marvel films, less superheroes. Because, I don't care how candy-colored Shazam is. He's not going to any of these conflict spots and stopping wars. So, I don't know.
And maybe that isn't probably the best vehicle to comment on those things anyway.
Well, exactly. You know what I mean? That's what I think about.
Yeah. Would you recommend the movie? Do you like the movie?
I don't know. I thought I'd recommend it if you're again. It's one of the things. I think if you're not really into the whole Mad Max saga, I don't think it is as easy to recommend. I think you have to have some sort of context.
Yeah, you definitely have to be kind of invested in, especially.
At the end where they were just kind of by the way,
Fury Road you can get into more because I think it's more palatable than this, where this one does sort of you have to go in, I think, with some sort of care about Again, I do, just there's context that needs to be there for you to have, I think, more engagement. So I recommend it on that level. Like, if you're into the series, then yeah, absolutely. But if you're going in with no context...
As a first entry?
Not as a first entry, no. Because you're better doing Fury Road and going backwards, because I think this one doesn't ease you into the world the same way I think that movie weirdly does.
Yeah.
I think is the way I said it.
I would agree with that, actually. I would say watch Fury Road first, because it's working back from that. It's not working towards it.
Also, the way the credits work, it also will make no sense. Because the credits literally are just Fury, segments from Fury Road.
They turned Fury Road into the mid-credits sequence. It's great.
Yeah.
It was genius. They did a Marvel thing.
They made it into a TikTok.
Would you recommend the movie?
I would have happily taken my mother to it, although, she passed away some years ago. Because, when Fury Road came out, I took her to the cinema. Because she watched the Mad Max films years and years ago, because she was a fan of Mel Gibson before he went crazy. But, and she enjoyed Fury Road. Because it was the same guy doing it. So I would have happily taken to that. I think she would have preferred Furiosa over Fury Road.
I think you're right.
It's more traditional filmmaking than Fury Road was. Because Fury Road is a very efficient engine for violence. And, for the kind of plot it's doing, while Furiosa is deliberately mythic in scope, and it's more like a traditional, old-school, big, sweeping film. So for someone, my mum was in her 70s, I think she would have jived with it a bit more than she did Fury Road. So if you're old, watch Furiosa.
I thought it was good, and it had that thing where Chris Hemsworth just looked like he was having a fucking ball.
Oh, yeah.
Looks like he just is going to turn to the camera at any point and goes, oh my gosh, you guys, I get paid for this. This is fucking great.
He's played the villain before in Bad Times at the El Royale and things like that, but he's never really become known for it. And maybe he should be getting more chances to kind of try and subvert the kind of Thor imagery a little. I feel like he's had enough opportunities as the hero. Maybe give him more chances to kind of just be bad.
Yeah, do it.
Yeah. Someone actually pointed out on Twitter, I did as a final thought, all the kind of Marvel guys like Hemsworth and Evans and Mark Ruffalo, they all seem to be having a real thriving time at the minute, just playing against type and playing bad guys. Yeah.
Well, when you're rich and studios will just hand you piles of cash to be in your film, it's like we were saying about Nick Cage the other night. Go for it. Live your dream. Do whatever you want,
And who knows?
Be an actor and an artist.
And who knows, in 5 to 10 years we might get the final Mad Max one, because Miller worked on Furiosa, Fury Road, and The Wasteland all at once.
Oh, really?
And script-wise and storyboard-wise, he worked out the entire... It's meant to be a big 3-part thing. Oh. I don't know if it's set before or during or after Fury Road. I have no idea, but it's about Max. And I heard rumors that it's going to be a miniseries. I don't know. I know that sections of this big Bible that he came up with back in the 90s was actually what they based the video game on. So that's why they line up so well, but not perfectly.
I don't want to play it now. Yeah. Oh, we still have it.
Yeah, we do. It was great fun.
Well, hope you enjoyed listening to this. Hopefully we've been relatively coherent. If you want to follow my stuff, there's a Linktree page. Go to tr.e/filmbrain. All my stuff is there. I'll save you having to go to a million places. Until next time, I'm Matthew Buck, fading out. Take care, everyone.